Right, we are back for our weekly coffee chat. So I've just downed my green juice. So I haven't got anything in front of me. And thank you everyone for being here. And as usual, back with my lovely friend Brice from Esoteric Atlanta. And we wanted to talk today about something that I honestly think impacts every single one of us, about chronic stress, trauma, and specifically today, I mean, it impacts every area of our lives, but specifically today about the impact on our decision making and how we view the world. So before we dive deep into that, how are you, Brice? And why do you think it's really important for us to be having this conversation today?
Well, I tell you, this has been a wild month. I think there's been a roller coaster of emotions, which definitely comes into our conversation today. And just this past week, my teacher, the Param guru of the Ashtanga lineage, passed away unexpectedly. Um, and I know we're on YouTube, so I'll be careful, but there's been a lot that's been said now because of past events and what potentially allegedly caused this. And so we're seeing these trauma responses and these almost trauma dumping from people who have held in this stress for so long. And so I think this is a super interesting, especially just given this past month of reflection of what we've all been through and how these stresses do dictate and these anxieties dictate our decisions, whether we know it or not.
It's such an important point, and I think so much of us have been really holding on for so long to so much trauma and stress, and we're really resilient as human beings. We're really, really resilient what we can put up with. Um, but this has been such a passion of mine because with on the human side of things, my one-to-one people that I work with, and on the animal side of things, probably for the last 15 years, the number one thing that comes up consistently across the board, whether it's a human or an animal, is this chronic stress and the impact that it's having on the physical, emotional, decision making. It just strips the joy and life force out of people, out of animals, and we all suffer from it. And I just wanted to mention some of these things for you about how and get your opinion on them because I know this is an area that you're really into as well, about how chronic stress affects our decision making. And the reason I really wanted to discuss this is look, we've had the election over in the USA. We've had everyone over the last few years looking at friendships, about their job situations, about their lifestyle choices, about what on earth's going on in their world, both locally and a collective and global level, and so many realizations. But when we're dealing with chronic stress, and chronic stress can turn into trauma, but trauma can be a separate response, and we'll come on to that as well. You know, it can be result from a separate issues and chronic stress. But when you're in a state of chronic stress, you are in a reactive state of mind. So you're making reactive decisions, not based on intentional long-term goals or your over well-being. So we all know that the worst time to make an important decision when you're in chronic stress. I mean, how do you think that's played out personally and collectively over what we're seeing with our community as well?
Well, it's interesting. Can I share screen, Catherine? As you were
Yeah,
talking, I'm like, oh my God, I've got to show this because this is interesting what you're saying about how it affects us and changes us. And I just Google image this, guys. You can actually look at brain scans of what different trauma and trauma responses and stress responses, how it actually changes. I know for like PTSD or what I was diagnosed with, I know this is controversial within the psychiatric form of medicine, but what CPTSD is complex post-traumatic, which is kind of what you were saying, Catherine, like the buildup of
yeah,
anxiety. So like PTSD would be like something happening, like a car wreck, or you go off to fight war, like there's an incident, like a life-changing incident that we see that in the military where one thing will happen that just shatters their nervous system, whereas CPTSD complex is where it's a snowball of stressors and stressors and stressors that literally change how your brain and how your like childhood trauma versus so you can I'm not going to say these
yeah.
words because of but you guys can just look this up for yourself just to look at these scans. It changes the way that I mean, we know that in a lot of cases, especially for women who deal with chronic stress, do end up showing later in life signs of ADHD.
Yeah.
because they're in survival mode, which makes sense. And so it does, whether we're aware of it or not, it does affect the way that we live in the world. That's what our bodies are designed to keep us alive. And so that's what the brain is doing, is it's actually in a simulated response to keep you alive. And I think, as humans, we have a hard time allowing ourselves to process it in order to come back to a balanced state. But it's interesting you say this too, Catherine, because I was watching this really fascinating TikTok from this young girl. I'll be careful how I say this, but she was talking about the past, we'll say competition. And she was saying how 87%, I don't know if you've seen these numbers yet, Catherine, it's pretty wild. 87% of America went for the red team.
Mm.
That's huge. 87%, only 13% went. That is a smackdown, and this girl was saying in the car, like for the liberals, what they're realizing now is that a lot of their friends and family have been lying to them.
Yeah.
And my boyfriend had said that about even having some empathy for the liberals in our life, the betrayal trauma that they must feel right now. But why did your friends lie to you in the first place? Because there was a stress response.
Yeah.
Of your reaction. So it's just stress response, responding to another stress response, responding to another stress response. And I do think that the media has a huge part to play in that as well. I think that they instigated a lot of that stressors in people. And, yeah, so I think that's what we're seeing. I think we're seeing a catharsis now of especially in America, because we are in such the majority that we're seeing people just release and like almost trauma dump this stress on their TikToks, because
Yeah.
all of a sudden this pent up anger, because sometimes anger is a form of it's a developmental form, and even with like grief, it's part of the grief cycle is anger.
Absolutely.
And so we're seeing it happen now. We're seeing it on all over TikTok. We're seeing it, from both sides. That there is, and even in our own community, Catherine, like you were saying, like you and I have questioned a lot of things in this particular community, and we've talked about this ad nauseum, that there are behaviors in our community that are exactly like the behaviors of the woke community, where we get almost villainized for just questioning something as well. And so it's a problem. I found this Thomas Paine quote that I pulled up. I love it. He who dares not offend cannot be honest.
Mm.
And because of the offending people has become such a crime in our world, hurting people's feelings is such a crime in our world now. None of us are being honest. And it's causing stress because we're only as sick as the secrets we keep, right?
That's such an important point, because this nervous system overload, and in terms of reactive choices, we're seeing the most horrendous reactive decision making happening that's never in your best interest and never in another in the other person's interest, unless you are literally about to be eaten by something. Then you just got to get the hell out of there. But we know we're not talking about that, so I don't think I need to go into that, because we've got a very intelligent bunch of listeners. But also this over commitment and people pleasing side of things. So we see this a lot now. Let me get that right. There is absolutely important to compliment people, and it's important to give positive feedback to people, and if you like something, but that's very different to the love bombing side of things, which is in a manipulative side of things and comes from a feeling of lack, and often is associated with chronic stress as well. And we've seen that big time happening in the awakening community, where people are in this state of stress and trauma, and then therefore one of the clear signs, because one of the things I really want to get across to people is that often you're the last person to notice that you're in this state. Other people will notice it. And I'm going to come on to share, and Brice and I will share, because I have been putting together from all my work with clients over the last 10-15 years an online program that I'm so pleased with, because I think it's really going to support people, and a blog on my site. But I think one of the things to realize is that this ability to self-respect and sort of say, how am I responding? And you and I have talked loads of times about how the body holds the clues. The body doesn't lie. And so if you've got unexplained weight gain, if you've got chronic fatigue, any sort of chronic disease, skin issues, digestive issues. I know straight away when I'm stressed because my
Yeah.
digestive system tells me straight away. We'll all have different areas where we hold stress in our body. And then also, how are we reacting to other people's? How compassionate are we? Can we sit back? And, as you and I always say, sign of intelligent person is to actually be able to entertain an idea
Yeah.
without having to agree to it. These are all signs. It will manifest differently in all of us. But if we start to recognize when we're in this state of chronic stress, which can also then turn into PTSD and does for a lot of people, then we'll understand why actually there's so much neuroscience, as you said, about why it makes us so programmable. Programmable by we might have, as we always say, we might have kicked out BBC and MSM, but are we then programmable by the other alternative media that has got their agenda at play?
Well, that's interesting too, because that goes back into the cult stuff because we know that people who come from, like our friend Kelly Teal, who was in Nexium, we know people when they come out of cults, statistically speaking, if you don't get the healing you need after cult programming, you're more likely to go back into another cult, which because it's a stress response. Because in cults, it's us versus them. If you
Yeah,
don't keep in alignment with us, then you're going to become one of them, and you've been programmed to think them is bad. And so you're in that fawn response. What do they call it? Fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, where you start to fawn. You start to kind of
mm,
emotionally try to regulate, emotionally manage those around you, and it's such a complex and complicated thing. And we know we can get into all the conspiracies of did they do this on purpose, blah blah blah, to try to weaken our minds. But and I know we always go back to our childhoods, but I mean we said this before, Catherine. I look back at my childhood and people were way thicker skinned back then.
yeah,
People of different political parties got married all the time. It
mm,
was just a joke. Ricky Gervais. I mean, he's talked about the idea of how it's not my job to make sure your feelings aren't hurt. And I
mm,
think we've seen that in the comedy. I used to love stand-up comedy, and now it's tanked
yeah.
because we're all in this like stress response and we can't it's just and yeah, even in our own little truther community, if I happen to disagree, let's say Catherine, let's say you and I were talking about a conspiracy and we had two opposing ideas on this conspiracy. I think one thing I like about us is we can still be friends.
Absolutely. And we've had loads
Yeah.
of different ideas, and then we'll change our ideas over time because that's what you do when you learn and grow. And interesting, I was out with two friends last night, and we've got very different ideas about things, but none of us were offended by the other people's ideas. We're all entitled to ideas and we can all learn from each other because it doesn't matter how much we think we're right, we've still always got so much to learn. And that's how I can tell almost how much I'm managing my stress is how do I get offended really easily? Do I go into a reactive state? Does my stomach tell me? There's all these different signs, but it's so tricky, and we've got this short term. Another sign of chronic stress and how it affects our decision making is short term focus, and look how
Yeah.
much I've seen that recently because we're so in survival mode. That's all we can do. We can't look at the bigger picture, and look how manipulatable that makes us because if all we're seeing is this little bit of the picture, we're missing so much that's essential to, are we all having the wool pulled over our eyes by certain political leaders, for example?
Yeah.
Well, if you're only looking at how they responded to this particular person, it's very easy for them to distract you. So you look here and you don't look about what else they're about to enforce on people.
And it's true for so many different. I mean, I was just as you were saying that, I was before you even said political, I was thinking about Mr. T, and I absolutely voted for him, and I am so glad he won. But I'm very skeptical of Elon Musk. I'm open-minded to it, but I'm keeping my eyes open that there could be some shenanigans going on, and even me saying that to the truther community could cause me to get backlash. Let me repeat: I voted for Trump. I support him absolutely. 87% of Americans have, but I'm still taking everything with a grain of salt.
Yeah,
We see this here in the United States with the whole from the other side of this competition with, we'll say, women's health. You guys know what I mean when I say women's health. The big thing came for and I'll just say the court case that was overturned by the Supreme Court involving women's health under the Biden administration, might I add you, not under the Trump administration. And we're seeing that rhetoric from the other side. Well, if you actually look at this case, what it did is it bumped it from a federal issue to states' rights. So every state has, and that actually should make people happy, women happy, because it gives us more of a voice. You know, if you have certain laws around women's rights in your state that you don't like, you can now vocalize that to overturn legislature in your own state. So it actually brings more power, but we see the rhetoric from the other side where there's manipulation, but there's manipulation from both sides, you know? And so we see how that manipulation can cause the stress response. You know, it's when both sides need to just chill out and keep their eyes open and be open to hearing opposing views. Always be open. I remember, you know, I think we talked about this like years ago, Catherine, because you're a scientist by trade. That's what you are. You're a scientist. And we saw the propaganda of trust the science. And I think it was it you that said, I know we talked about it, science doesn't even trust the science. Like that's the point of science.
But that's the whole point. That's, you know, what you do with a hypothesis. You set a hypothesis and you look to go and prove or disprove it. And that's a constantly moving target because every day you're learning new things that could put you in a completely different direction.
So just by saying trust the science brings you to absolute allegiance to a leader, where in reality, science doesn't even trust the science. No. You know, I know with my family being in medicine, you know, it's called practicing medicine for a reason because it's a practice. It's not. My grandfather used to talk about when he would do surgery, like he could have a person who was 3-pack-a-day smoker and he could open their chest and their lungs would be fine. And he would have another person who never touched a cigarette and they would have really, there's just something inexplainable sometimes with life force. And so that's why science can't trust the science, because you could have 10 people respond a certain way to one thing and you have that 1/11th person who responds totally different. And doesn't that science mirror the macro and the micro, mirror the way we are in our personalities and the way that we objectively see things? Like there's always got to be room for mistakes to be made, for opinions to change. And I think if we all got back to that place where we can be open-minded with each other, then we will see our stress responses as a world start to decrease and start to decline, because we won't be afraid to tell people how we feel, because even if someone has a different opinion, there would be no violence or vitriol. It would just be an open discussion, and then you're just going to go get a beer later and it's fine. You know, does that make sense? Like we got to get back
completely. I heard a really good sort of interview, and I was sort of doing other stuff. I was multitasking, so I didn't listen to every word of it. But with RFK talking today, and people were asking him how he dealt with the stress of the whole campaign with everything he's been through. And he said it was really fantastic because he'd spent, and I'm just using these two as examples, he'd spent an intensive amount of time over the last few weeks with Donald Trump. Now, RFK meditates every day. He's recovering addiction from his addiction, so he goes to a 12-step meeting every single day, wherever he is in the country. He eats really cleanly, he drinks loads of water, and he exercises. So wherever he is, every single day without fail, he goes to the gym, he meditates, and he goes to a 12-step meeting, which is incredible. He said, in contrast, President Trump doesn't do any of that, and always eats Kentucky Fried Chicken or McDonald's, and he's never seen him drink a glass of water. But the difference is both of them have found ways to manage their stress response. So every single one of us needs these tools in our toolkit to keep us on track. And because Trump has got this different way of seeing and dealing with the world, this mental resilience, he can get away with a lot more in the physical side of things than a lot of us can, you know, because a lot of us do need to look after our physical better a lot more. Now, he's late 70s or 78 or something, isn't he, Trump?
Yeah, like 78,
And you know, Kennedy was saying that when he did his victory speech, he'd been up for 48 hours without a single bit of sleep. Now, how many of us watching could do that? Now, my point behind this is every single one of us responds to stress in a different ways, and our responsibility so that we can change our own world and impact and show up in our outer world in a better way is to understand how it affects us and to understand what tools we need in our toolkit to help us as individuals. And that will be different starting points for all of us. And, RFK has to have a completely different stress management kit to Donald Trump because they're different, but yet they both recognize very strongly what they need and do that consistently.
I love you brought that up too, because that gets back to like the idea of dispositions in people. And again, that the science isn't the same for every person, which goes back to like more Ayurvedic medicine, that that respected that life force was going to look differently with different people. I know you on your Instagram talk a lot about cortisol. I talk about cortisol too with my students. When we look at even things like exercise, I know a lot of people, a lot of attorneys that have like really high stress jobs who are big time runners because that's how they process. They just put their running shoes on. That's how they process the stress of their jobs. However, with the RFK Donald Trump situation, certain people, if their cortisol level is too out of control, running is going to make it worse.
Yeah.
Because the body is already almost in fight or flight. And so it thinks that you are literally in war. And so it's going to start to you might have the opposite effect with weight gain, with and so you might need more. And that's what RFK is saying, is to know yourself, to know how your nervous system reacts and what your disposition is, and to study that. I think, we can go on forever about like the food pyramid and all these things they've done to like really make us like confused, thinking we all have this one size fits all, I think running it's overall, there's great benefits to running for some people.
Yeah.
Not for everybody. And it depends on your disposition. It depends on so many things. Donald Trump is a lot older than RFK. Yeah. But I would say, RFK looks damn good for his age because
amazing, absolutely amazing. Have you seen how many pull-ups he can do?
Oh my God, my best friend who's a gay guy, he was like, listen, he was like, the team he's putting together is so good looking. And then you look at people like JD Vance, and I didn't know much about JD. I had seen Hillbilly Elegy. I didn't even realize that was the same person. Have you seen that movie?
No.
It was a book. It's good. It's about him. He had written a book about his life. He came from poverty and the Appalachian Mountains, and basically now this is long before he was selected to be Trump's running mate. But I've gotten to know, I feel like not know him, but as our vice president elect, watching his interviews and stuff and seeing the way he responds and how fast he is. He's fast. He is smart. He is fast to respond. And he's got a wife, Usha, who is Hindu. Her parents immigrated, and I've read articles about how she's had to learn how to take the stress of being a senator's wife with literally nobody who she was, to now being the second lady elect, the first Hindu second lady elect of our country. And so I find that interesting too. I love that RFK spoke about that, because I think I learn a lot from reading other people's, how other people, you can learn things about people. And that's hysterical that McDonald's is Trump's stress.
It is hysterical. And this is, the point of all this is bringing it sort of back to why I really want to just have this discussion today, is when we're not recognizing that we're in a state of chronic stress, every aspect of our life will be impacted. And where that shows up first will be different for all of us. Some people it's health issues. Some people of it is chronic anxiety. Other people is making really poor life choices, addictions, wrong partners, wrong job decisions, taking advice from the wrong people. It will show up differently in all of us. But the difference is once you start recognizing the signs, what is known, it doesn't matter how it shows up for you, it will shorten your life.
Yeah.
It will have a dramatic impact on your joy, your gratitude, your life force, whatever you do. And it will have a huge negative impact on anyone around you, whether it's a human, an animal, or a plant, because we're giving off that aura. And animals are so good at picking up the stress responses, and they can smell it in our pheromones. They can read our energies. And actually, we humans can too, which is why we feel uncomfortable. We just don't recognize it often unless we've sort of rebuilt that skill in ourselves. But the good thing is, with all of us, everyone's always, we see these discussions and we have it as well. Who do I trust? Are they good? Are they bad? We're never going to know that when we're stuck in that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. And it's not you do this once and then job done. It's not like you get your degree and then you've got that certificate and you're all forever and you don't need to do it again. This is a daily thing. And what research has shown literally unanimously across the board is the biggest impact we can all have on managing our chronic stress is to actually put good lifestyle habits in place, good daily actions, get to know yourself, get to know what works for you. Have these tools in your toolkit that when everything's going well, you can leave them in the toolkit, leave them on your shelf, in your handbag, wherever you want to leave them. But when you then notice things are starting to go off, the quicker you implement them, the better the results for you and the better the results for everyone else. Because none of us want to be around someone who's in that state of chronic stress. It's painful.
I think I was about to say I'm laughing because yeah, if you're not sure if you're stressed out, watch your dog.
Yeah,
Watch your dog. Your dog will recognize, like I know when Ravi is like what I perceive as being needy, when
yeah.
he's constantly wants to be with me, it's because I'm stressed. So he's coming to fawn me.
Mm,
That's why they can be emotional support, like like, and so and that's not his responsibility. He should not
mm.
have that I'm the mama. I'm supposed to be taking care of him, and I love that. Yeah, it's and I love, I think Catherine too, we've been so taught, especially in like the Western, and it's crazy because you're in the UK, I'm in the United States. We are so blessed to be
Yeah,
born in the United States or the United Kingdom. Like we have such, I hate to use the word privilege, but we have such privilege. I mean, Catherine, you've traveled to a lot of third world developing countries, so have I. Like, we really lucked out to
yeah.
be born in the countries, and all of our audience from Canada, Australia. Like, if you're in a Western first world country, do you realize how lucky But I think one thing that's happened is as a women, especially, I know this affects men too. I think stress kind of affects us differently, but I think for women, we already have the constitution to be probably a little bit more submissive, to be more nurturing. That's just the female. That's just kind of how females are, generally speaking. Generally speaking, and I think we with our empathy have been trained to put ourselves last and
Yeah,
to always. And it's that oxygen mask, though. You put it on first. And so for people to prioritize at least 30 minutes a day to deal with themselves, whether that's in
absolutely.
quiet time where you just sit in quiet for 30 minutes with no stimulation, or you're going for a walk or a run or a quick little yoga class, 30 minutes for you to get in touch with yourself and to start to look at these negatives. I mean, I'm sure with little kids too. I'm not a parent, but I'm sure little kids can pick up when their mom's stressed or when their dad's stressed.
Massively. And I want to while you're on that subject of saying for those of you, because everyone watching this will be in a different stage of their life with different responsibilities that they've got. But first thing I would say is, look, if RFK can make time every single day, wherever he is in the country, to go to the gym, to go to a 12-step meeting and meditate. Now, I know he's not caring for young children, but he's got a lot on his plate. But if you've got young children or elderly relatives, you can do a lot of this self-care with them in the room. If
Oh,
you do,
absolutely.
Joe Dispenza talks a lot about when he had his young children, he would do the meditations with them each evening. I do it, and with my animal clients as well. We do our breathing exercises and our meditation with our animals because they will pick up on this hugely. So where there's a will, there's a way. There really is. And the great thing is you don't need you don't need to sit there for 10 hours and do it. These short, sharp things that you can have in your toolkit are absolutely essential, and we need it because look, there's time of great change astrologically. If you look at in terms of what's the word I'm looking for, Brice, when they're saying, this has been predicted, these times have been
Oh, it's prophesized.
prophesized. Sorry, I had a mental block there because I'm stressed. Prophesized for ages. Whatever your belief systems are around there. But if you want to really take back your power and free yourself from overwhelm, which is so, so damaging, and build that resilience that we all talk about, you have to just look after your own stress levels. You just have to, because you can't impact positively on everyone else if you're not doing that.
I mean, the Cassiopean said the same thing. What's going to get you through this time is taking care of yourself, resistance training, doing things to really get your mind in, which when they say resistance, they mean
Yeah.
like type of anaerobic, like that's forcing your mind into your body. Absolutely. It's imperative now that you take care of yourself so that you can take care of others.
Yeah.
And absolutely, I 100%. It's so funny talking about Joe Dispenza. I was thinking about that because I think so many people have these like, they have the reality and the expectation, and your expectation is you're going to have this room in your house that's a total temple, and you need
Yeah,
it. I mean, even for me as an authorized teacher, I practice in my kitchen by the dog bowl. Do you know how many times Robbie comes and sits on me during practice or comes over,
absolutely.
wants me to scratch his butt in the middle of, like, he just puts his hiney up to me to scratch his butt while I'm practicing. Like, that's just how it is. And it's not pretty. Usually my sports bra might be on backwards, it's nothing matches. It's just you got to get rid of the expectation and just focus on the reality. And there's so many people, if you don't believe me, just go on YouTube. You can see so many people practicing yoga with their kids like hanging off their bodies. I mean, even in India with my teacher who just passed away, his son, who is a young boy, we would be in the main shala practicing and he would come in with his Nerf, GUN, his Nerf, and just start like playing around us. And here we are in
Yeah.
this shala having this serious practice, and this 8-year-old's running around with his Nerf toy, and that's just that's just how it is. We had one little girl that was there with her mom, and she would have her iPad on and her headphones on, and it'd be quiet, everyone's practicing, and then she'd be in the corner singing, not even realize she was singing out loud, but her little voice, and Sharat just left her because that's the reality, right? That's the reality. And so don't put any expectation of that time being perfect.
Oh,
Just
I
make
just so love what you said about that. I just want to clap on that because I wish I could film myself, but I've got Bent set up here because I'm going to talk more about my Bulgaria clip in a trip in the coming weeks because it was just life changing. Watch this space. But when I was doing my exercise the other day, my cat was like lying right on my chest chin. I was like, no, I need to change position, and I can't because she said. But this is the whole point. I also had a client last week where we were talking about this, and they were saying why they'd got out of their meditation practice because they used to have a lovely little area all set up, and now her hips are bad, so she can't sit cross-legged. And I was like, these are just excuses. Not meant to do that. We're not meant to wait. We don't. In fact, waiting to be perfect is going to put so much stress on you. So I so love you do this, and having fun with it as well. You can't, you can have fun and let your animals join in, let your children join in, let people laugh at what you look like. I mean, honestly, when I started going to the gym again, my yoga pants were like ripped where I've been doing the horses and I'd walk through the brambles and everyone just laughs at me nicely, and I'm like, I don't care, I haven't had time to sew them up now, so I'll just go with the flow. Please don't wait to be perfect. But I can't stress enough how important it is now if we want to see things clearly, if we want to be able to trust our instincts, trust our intuition, if we want to support the right people that are going to have the best interest for whatever our belief systems are at heart, if we want to enjoy life and not be constantly, oh, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, and just led like sheep one person or the other for whatever side of the fence you're on, then this is an absolute must, and it's such a game changer.
Yeah, and if you guys, I'm just gonna put this out there, and I'm sure, Catherine, you got your course coming up, but if you're someone whose hips are bad or you have all these excuses, just contact me or Catherine. If your hips are bad, put your legs up the wall and lay your back down on this, because it's just the most important thing is your spine is straight. So however you got
Yeah,
to do it, you got to do it. And you're right. So why are you stressed? Why are you creating obstacles? Because you're stressed about getting to know yourself
yeah.
and yourself. And so take that power back. Yeah, it's all excuses. I always tell my students, unless you're in the middle of a natural disaster, or you're in the middle of giving birth, like, or you're super sick, like that, there's no excuse. So, yeah,
I absolutely love it. Can I just quickly share my course that I've just launched?
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
And both Brice and I, can you see that okay?
Yes, yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So both Brice and I, I'm going to ping a link below and anyone can contact me. For the next 10 days, I'm going to do a 50% off discount because this is something that I'm so passionate about. Now, I'm not going to let you, I'll put the link below and you can read through all of this. But at the moment, it's $197. This is lifelong access, and there is so much information in there. So you've got a 60 page ebook that you can print off if you like. You've got 16 videos and audios here. So it doesn't matter what your learning style is, you've got audios here on what's the difference between chronic stress, how do you recognize it, where does it come from? This is a really important one because when you understand that, you can understand what to look at it. reducing stress with exercise, with eating, with sleep, with journaling, with self-care. This will surprise you. Self-care doesn't look what we'll talk to be. It doesn't have to be a bubble bath with candles going. It can be, but it's learning what self-care for you. Talking to others, meditation and breathing, supplements, and really importantly, your evening routine and your morning routine. And then you've got audios for all of those. So if you want to listen on the go, there's an app for this, and you can ask questions as you go through. So if you want a 50% off discount code from me, follow the link that will be below. And both Brice and I have got a lot up our sleeves that we want you to be, we'll be talking more before Christmas about this, but we are really going all in, aren't we, Brice, to really support our communities and ourselves in the process, and really put a lot of these into action and make it really achievable for people to transform their lives.
100%. I'm so excited. I can't, and this is, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. So you guys, you're worth it. You're worth taking that time. Your quality of life is worth it. Your kids are worth it. Your spouses are worth it. Your animals are worth it to be okay with you. I think some of us have forgotten what it's like to not have that much stress. But wouldn't that be a great place to get back to, where we actually remember what that's like, to just authentically be us?
Beautiful. I love it. And I'm so happy, I just want to say, to be on this journey with you, Brice. I think, we've just grown so much. I hope people agree, in the right direction over the last few years. And this is what it's all about. It's about having people that you can share this journey with, learn from each other, support each other. And we're here to support you. And we really want to hear from you how else we can support. We've got such exciting things coming out. But please do click on that link below. And I've had quite a few people since the people on my newsletter link. I really want people to sign up for my newsletter, and Brice will be having a link to share for hers soon. The reason is I had my Facebook account hacked and taken down with goodness knows how many thousands. I've had 2 attempts at hacking my Instagram this week alone. And all these platforms, we know we're very shadow banned on here. I mean, we've both been, just from a personal experience over the last few weeks, I've been showing a lot of natural health stuff on the animal side of things, and YouTube do not like that at all. So if you get on our newsletter list, you'll always be the first to know and get support. Neither of us spam you at all. But equally, it just means if something does get taken down, we can connect back in with you and say where we're starting again. So
yeah,
please do that. It means a lot to us.
On that note, too, I will say, Catherine, especially these next few months coming up, you guys know what I'm alluding to. Just make sure that you are still subscribed to us, and make sure you're following us on Instagram, TikTok, because they are unsubscribing people. That's not us. That's happening. I'm not saying it's all conspiratorial based, but it's just make sure that you're constantly just checking, not just with Catherine and me, but all of the people that you want to be in touch with. Just make sure, do that due diligence to make sure that you're still, because it's gonna be an interesting couple of months, but hopefully after this few months rolls around, we'll see some changes in that. But yes, and I want to thank our audience too, Catherine. Speaking of like shadow banning, for all those people that have stuck by us, through the storms that we have walked through, you are greatly appreciated. And so hopefully that will just be, the best is yet to come, right? The best is yet to come. So
thank you, everyone. And next week we will be back on Brice's channel as usual. For those new listeners here, we do 1 week on my channel, 1 week on Brice's. All Brice's links will be below. Thanks so much, everyone. See you next week. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. And if you feel inspired, please do share with your friends and family. This helps us spread the word, and also helps me encourage some exciting new guests to take part in this podcast. And above all, stay curious and stay free.